BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And just a quick reminder, every Monday is Zodiac Mondays. Wednesday is an Ask Me Anything. That's an AMA, so please drop your questions below for things that you would like discussed here on the show. And Friday is an Anything Goes. Any subject is fair game, mostly talking about true crime, serial killers, the Zodiac Killer, but any subject is welcome. All right, so please share some ideas in the comment section about what you would like to hear about on this channel, and let's get started. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Friday, and Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. Today we will be discussing the disappearance of Lee Cutler from 2007, but first I would like to make one announcement. Last year, in the summer of 2020, it was pretty rough. We had the global pandemic, quarantine, all of the issues with the coronavirus on top of whatever our current lives were dealing with. But one of the places that I found refuge in on the internet and on the go was the podcast Once Upon a Time in the Valley, which I got from radio.com, but it has now been put on to YouTube, the first 4 episodes anyway, and it is the story of Nora Kuzma, who then changed her name to Tracy Lords and infiltrated the adult entertainment industry. I was very enthusiastic about listening to Once Upon a Time in the Valley last year, and I even started listening to it again on YouTube. I found those 4 episodes that are available. I thought about doing a response to it here on this channel, but I really felt that maybe it's not the best direction to go on Black Box Online Radio. But with the story of Tracy Lords, the thesis of Once Upon a Time in the Valley is that she was a 15-year-old who lied about her age to enter the porn industry, and they wanted to share that the people who were involved with the industry had no idea that they were not the ones who coerced her into this or manipulated her, or she wasn't actually a victim. But in the years since, after talking a lot about true crime and psychology and just human behavior on this channel, I would almost certainly say that if a 15-year-old was doing something like that, lying about their age so that they could be involved with that type of material, being an active participant in pornography with adults, then that's coming from a place of trauma. And on the podcast Once Upon a Time in the Valley, I was listening to one of the sources that they cited, and it was Tracy Lords' interview with Larry King on his former talk show Larry King Live. So I listened to that one, and Tracy Lords shared some things that are actually connected to today's episode, The Disappearance of Lee Cutler, believe it or not, so please stay tuned. And she said that, firstly, she was the victim of rape. When she was 10 years old, she was raped by a 16-year-old. Secondly, she was molested by her mother's boyfriend, so she ended up running away, and this was all the motivation for lying about her age. So indeed, she was the victim of abuse. But also, before she ran away, and before she even had done anything with the adult film industry, when she was a teenager, going to school, she was wearing mini skirts and high heels, trying to dress provocatively, because she talked about the underlying psychological structure of it all. I mean, we have the conscious motivation, what we're thinking about, and like the reasons why we do things that we tell ourselves. Then there's the underlying psychological structure, like what are the actual motivating factors that our instincts are guiding us to, that we aren't completely aware of, that we could put into words instantaneously. And she said an underlying structure of it all was she wanted somebody to notice her, to prevent her from going back to any of these abusive situations that she was in, and that she's not handling it directly, because that's not what teenagers do. That's not what children do. They might do something different to draw a different type of focus onto themselves, and then Tracy Lords said very clearly to Larry King, nobody noticed, nobody did anything, and nobody paid her that specific type of attention in a good way, not in a bad way. So then her behavior went on to escalate, and you can hear more about this in the podcast Once Upon a Time in the Valley on YouTube or radio.com, where I got it from. Moving on to today's topic, this is one that was requested by one of the listeners, giving a shout out to James Cheney, who sent this one to the Facebook page. Anybody can write the show, Black Box Online Radio on Facebook. Also, my personal Facebook is in the description box here, BlackBoxNet88 on Instagram if you'd like to follow the show there. And you can also contact me at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com. All of this is in the description box, as well as putting your ideas for future episodes in the comments section down below. And he simply said, would you be interested in doing an episode on the disappearance of Lee Cutler from 2007? And at first, I didn't recognize this case, but I would like to share that I began to recall a few things a little bit later on. But right now, to help us out with the introduction, I would like to go to the website illinoismissing.com. And this is from Buffalo Grove, Illinois. And we're going to look at some of the circumstances surrounding the disappearance of Lee Cutler. He was last seen on October 20th, 2007 in Buffalo Grove, Illinois. His car was later found in Baraboo, Wisconsin, which is about 200 miles from his home. He has not been seen or heard from since. Inside the vehicle was a receipt from Kettle Moraine State Forest, printed at 1:41 p.m. on October 20th. Searchers later found some of his belongings. They found his backpack, some blankets, an empty pill bottle, which contained over-the-counter pain and sleep aids. And it's like one of those PMs, like how we have Tylenol PM, Advil PM. It's one of those over-the-counter sleep aids, but it also has the pain medicine. And they would also find some of his items submerged or partially submerged in a nearby river. His wallet, ID, some cash, his keys, and his pants. Lastly, they found letters to his family and girlfriend. Lee suffered from depression, and in the letters, he referenced finally being able to sleep, and he also apologized for being a coward. Okay, so after James had recommended this idea for an episode, I decided to get on YouTube and see what kind of sources I could find. And at the very top of the search results was a video from Danielle Hallen's channel. I'm a big fan of Danielle Hallen. In the past, I watched her channel a lot, but these days I mostly listen to her for her show Crime After Crime, which she co-hosts with John Lorden. They have their own channel set up for that, Crime After Crime. It's a monthly podcast. And I've seen every single episode. Some of them I've seen twice. I'm about 14 episodes into rewatching the series because I really wanted to experience it a second time. I like a lot of the things that they do. And when I was watching Danielle Hallen's channel talking about the disappearance of Lee Cutler, she left out a very particular detail until the later part of her episode, near the end, and I even left it out from this article that I just read from IllinoisMissing.org. I may have said .com the first time, it's actually IllinoisMissing.org. So first she's talking about all of these things. Okay, this guy drives 200 miles away. He has disappeared. In his car they find an empty pill bottle. They find his clothes in the river, as well as his wallet containing identification. So instantly I was like, well, I'm not a perfect forensic, scientific, whatever, but this seems like a suicide, right? But then, Danielle Hallen saved something for the end when she said, there is also a copy of the book, Into the Wild. And they made a movie about it with Emile Hirsch, and Vince Vaughn even is in the film for a little bit, and Jenna Malone too, I think. And once she said that they left they found the book Into the Wild present in his with his belongings, it came back to me and I was like, oh yes, I saw this on the television ages ago, somewhat of an extended news report. There is an episode of Disappeared about this case, but I have not seen that one. This is But I did watch this because I had recently seen the movie Into the Wild, the one starring Emil Hirsch, and then I saw this news report and I was like, hey, wait a second. I mean, like, it really caught my attention because of, well, just because of a little bit of familiarity. But it's about the story of a guy named Chris McCandless who decides that he wants to get away from society and that more or less there is some type of corrupt or even saddening element within the civilization that has been established by humanity. So he wants to go into the wild to be with nature or to find some type of solitude in it all. But I don't really mean to give away the ending, but there is something that he has written in conclusion after spending ages in the wild, and it was true happiness is found when shared. So he had a big reversal on that. I mean, if you're going to use Into the Wild as a blueprint for running away and starting a new life in the wilderness, he definitely did not have a good experience in the end. At first, yes. At the end, no. But one of the other aspects of Into the Wild is this guy, Chris McCandless, changed his name to Alexander Supertramp. He had a totally made up name, but is that something that could have happened with the disappearance of Lee Cutler? I mean, perhaps, and it actually is one of the leading theories. Suicide is one that people still entertain to this day, and they think that maybe he did indeed go to commit suicide. But there's so many possibilities because the evidence is really not that not that overwhelming in any direction. I would now like to go over to the Charlie Project, and they have a post here. I mean, the Charlie Project is great. I also noticed that they have a donate button on their site, and while I do not accept any donations, if you would ever consider making a donation to this show, you can go ahead and give it to the Charlie Project. They do some great stuff. But I would like to read their post here, and it says as well that Lee Cutler disappeared on October 20th, 2007. Cutler spent the night of October 19th, 2007 with friends. He was dropped off at his friend's home in Buffalo Grove, Illinois at 10 a.m. the next morning and said that he was going to a clothing store where he worked part-time. He actually says he's going to the clothing store where he worked part-time, but I think you get the idea. He was scheduled to start work at noon, but he never arrived there and he has never been heard from again. On October 21st, his locked 2007 Toyota Corolla was found parked at a rest stop near the bluffs of East Baraboo, Wisconsin, along the Baraboo River. This area is nearly 200 miles from Cutler's home. Lee enjoys hiking, camping, and he had visited the area at least once before, but his loved ones do not know why he would have gone there again. Inside the vehicle was a receipt from the Kettle Moraine State Forest, printed at 1:41 p.m. on October 20th. Searchers found Cutler's backpack and some of his blankets were found near the Baraboo River. Lee's pants containing his wallet identification, some cash, and his car keys were partially submerged in the river. Among the items located were an empty bottle of over-the-counter pain medication and sleep aid, that's that PM stuff we were talking about, a copy of Into the Wild, and some notes to his family and girlfriend. The notes did not specifically mention suicide, but in one letter, he wrote to his mother saying, "I'll finally get to sleep." The extensive search turned up no sign of Lee, and investigators stopped looking and announced that they were certain he was not in the area. Well, I mean, you might be thinking about some possibilities immediately, whether this was an attempted suicide or whether this was some type of running away, or it's like someone who's just trying to start a new life and they're trying to disappear. Either way, I mean, he could have abandoned his items and then gone on and met any type of situation, but they do seem quite convinced that his body was not found nearby. I mean, if it were a suicide, that is just the answer. I mean, like, I was definitely leaning that way when I was first hearing that video from Daniel Howland, but habeas corpus, I mean, where did he end up if he had committed suicide? And I would just like to share one question that Danielle Howland posed, or I guess you could phrase it into a comment, but she did ask it like a question, and it was talking about how when there are these missing persons cases, do people pay less attention to them, or do the people think they're less important if the primary theory is that this person committed suicide. And to be honest, I don't think that people really have any lower amount of importance in their mind about a missing persons case if the leading theory is suicide, whether it's the disappearance of Moore Murray, the disappearance of Brandon Lawson, or perhaps some other cases, maybe the disappearance of Tara Calico, which almost certainly wasn't a suicide in that one. But I mean, I just wanted to say that I think people want the truth, whether it's the armchair detectives, whether it's law enforcement, or whether it's actually the people who are directly connected to these individuals, friends, family, loved ones. That was just an interesting comment and question that was shared on her channel. And back to the Charlie Project. Unfortunately, there was no evidence of, like my mind was looking at a word from a different paragraph, and I read two words together at the wrong time. There's the top paragraph and the bottom paragraph. It says, although there is no evidence of foul play. I was looking at two things. I almost said, unfortunately, there is no evidence of foul play. I'm being very clear. That was a misreading. Although there is no evidence of foul play in his disappearance, it is uncharacteristic of Cutler to leave without warning, and his family fears for his safety. His case remains unsolved, and anybody with information can contact the Buffalo Grove Police Department at 847-459-2560, 847-459-2560. And because this was a disappearance from 2007, they posted a lot of source information, everything from the Chicago Sun-Times to Project Jason to the Daily Herald, but a lot of these links are no longer active, and that they simply just are websites that have not maintained their subscriptions. They're dead links, more or less. But I think at this point, let's talk about some of the physical evidence. And there's that receipt that is found in his car for a state forest. And I got on YouTube and I was listening to a channel that I had never heard of before, and it was called Disappeared the Abyss. And they have an episode called Disappeared Lee Cutler, and they talked about that receipt that was in the car. But I would like to just give them a shout out because the description of their channel is True Crime Podcast for anyone who loves a good mystery. Join hosts Jacob and Alina as they discuss early episodes of ID's Disappeared. But even if you haven't seen the episode, you can still follow along with their narrations. Very nice channel that they have there, and the discussion about Lee Cutler was beneficial because of the first place that I heard this theory that this receipt from the state forest says that Lee Cutler had paid $7, and $7 was the price for in-state residence. But he didn't live in Wisconsin. We've said very clearly that he's from Illinois, right? Even the first source that I read off was from Illinois Missing. So what does that suggest? And they mentioned a theory that some people have is that if he got the in-state price to the state forest, then was he with somebody earlier in the day? And did he meet up with someone to, to do that, to start a new life, but abandoning all of his items, throwing his wallet and ID and maybe even some of his clothing into a lake, and then get into somebody else's car? And then was this an absolute disappearance? But I mean, totally staged, and then maybe the pill bottle was left behind to make it look like a suicide. And sure that he didn't run off into the wild, but some people would think, oh, maybe he committed suicide. Some people would think maybe he went into the wild to start a new life in the wilderness. But in reality, he simply got into somebody else's car. That was one theory that they discussed, but I think both the hosts were not leaning toward that. This episode is 50 minutes long on their channel, so it's really good to hear some other extended discussions. All right, though. How about a different narrative? And I think I first heard it from Danielle Hallen when she was asking the question, what do you make of that? Finding an empty pill bottle that had previously contained sleeping pills. I am not a lawyer. I have never been to law school. I have never done anything of the sort. But after watching loads of true crime dramas, the growing lawyer in me wants to ask the question, how does anybody know that the empty pill bottle was emptied at the time of his disappearance? I mean, could it have been empty for an extended period of time before he had disappeared? Before the 20th of October 2007? Or even if he emptied the pill bottle, did he not, could he have taken the pills with him, put them into a different container, and when he left, bear in mind that his remains were never found, so who is to say that he ingested all of them? But I think that one of the theories that people have casually looking into this case is that he may have undergone some type of emotional break. And it could have been fueled by ingesting a large amount of sleeping pills. I've never really done too much with those things like Tylenol PM, Advil PM, Aleve PM, but the few times that I have taken them, I don't really think that it has worked too well for me. So I don't think those things knock you out immediately. But if anybody has any firsthand experiences taking over-the-counter sleeping pills, I would love to hear your response in the comments section below. When I use over-the-counter sleep aids, I use a ZQuil, and that does knock you out pretty quickly. But somebody told me that the active ingredient is the same as Benadryl, but that is going to be more intense than any of these things that he would have been taking. But the theory is that perhaps he could have experienced some type of either emotional break or so. I'm tempted to use the phrase psychotic decompensation, the term psychotic decompensation rather, but that's more like travel-induced psychosis where somebody has a mental lapse or some type of, we'll just add a psychotic break while they're when they're traveling to another country. So I don't think that that's quite it, but there are some similar cases where people have had very intense struggles with their mental health, and then they get into a car and then they just drive to a different location. I mean, the first one that I thought of was the disappearance and then later the death of Jonathan Luna. And there's a book about him called The Midnight Ride of Jonathan Luna, as well as many other sources here on YouTube. I highly recommend the Lord and Arts episode on what happened to Jonathan Luna. I would like to go over to a different website called storiesoftheunsolved.com that says Lee Cutler was born on October 2nd, 1989. Growing up, he lived in Buffalo Grove, Illinois, where he shared a house with his mother, Beth, his stepfather, Larry, and his older brother. He also had a stepsister through his mother's marriage to Larry. Lee was described as a naturally social kid whom many in his life saw as a close confidant. He wanted those around him to be happy and would go out of his way to ensure that they felt his love. However, Lee would rarely open up to his friends, saying he didn't want to burden them with his problems. As such, he would often set out on his own to meditate or write. Observant of his faith, Lee was open about his dedication to his religion. He would read the Torah and regularly wore his yarmulke. While in the ninth grade, he founded a local chapter of the Jewish group B'nai B'rith, excuse me if I'm mispronouncing that, or BBYO. Well, the first two letters of that are really cool. Where he soon became the president of the boys' chapter. When not at work or school, he would spend his time planning activities for the group. And there are some other activities that Lee did that are a little bit different, and they really talked about this a lot on Disappeared the Abyss. He would go to a truck stop and try to interact with truckers, or he would also go to a parking garage and just do his thinking there. And on Disappeared the Abyss, they asked a question, what kind of hobby is that? What kind of person goes to a truck stop and just to talk to truckers? And I remember doing things like that when I was a kid. Like when I was about maybe 9 or 10 years old, there was one of the neighbors who was about 2 years younger than me, and he was just begging me one day, hey, let's go over and talk to the janitors at the school. And, and I was just like, no. He's like, what are you, chicken? Are you a dummy or something? And I'm like, no, I don't want to talk to the janitors, the custodians of our elementary school when we're not in school. Some people do want to do things like that, and that is not completely unheard of, but that was much younger. That kid was about 8 years old. I was about, as I said, maybe 10 years old. Definitely not in the teen years. Okay, in 2006, Lee began to showcase suicidal tendencies after breaking up with his girlfriend. He took a knife to school and threatened to commit suicide. And also from the Abyss, they said that Lee was actually the one who had broken up with her, but he was still emotionally affected by it. This resulted in him being hospitalized and having to attend therapy. Now, if I recall what the response to therapy was, his mother believed that the therapy was not helpful because she thought that he wasn't actively participating in it, or she simply thought that maybe the therapists weren't getting through to him. But I think that's the exact phrasing, that he wasn't participating in it properly. Okay, that's totally not the exact phrasing, but he was not properly participating in the therapy. In 2007, Lee was a senior at Stevenson High School and had begun to think about his future. He was undecided whether or not he wanted to attend post-secondary education and weighing other options, including possibly joining the Israeli Defense Forces. He wanted to help bring peace to the country, so he and his mother researched the military group. And I also read somewhere else that he was thinking about going to school overseas, particularly in Israel. So there's also something like that that suggests that, is this just somebody who is filled with escape, starting over, reinventing himself in some way? On the evening of October 19th, 2007, Lee attended the 18th birthday party of a childhood friend. There was a dinner, after which he was seen playing hacky sack outside with a few friends. To all those in attendance, he appeared to have been having a good time and showed no signs that anything was off. While at the party, Lee asked his mother if he could sleep over at a friend's house, which she agreed to, as long as he called her the next day. Before leaving, he gave her a hug, which she said that went on for longer than usual. Lee spent the night with his two friends playing video games before heading to bed. Beth called her son and left him a message. At 12 a.m. on October 20th, Lee texted a close friend and indicated that he was having trouble fitting in and communicating with those around him. However, his friend didn't think too much of this, as Lee was known for getting too inside his head and overthinking things. Are you still listening? Are you with me? What did we say at the beginning of this discussion? What did they say at the beginning of this article when it says that Lee was described as a naturally social kid who many in his life saw as a close confidant? He wanted those around him to be happy and would go out of his way to ensure they felt his love. However, Lee would rarely open up to his friends, saying he didn't want to burden them with his problems. Well, which one is it? Is he somebody who is not going to be talking about how he feels? Or is he someone who is talking to people about how he feels, but they're saying, oh yeah, well he does that all the time, I didn't think much of it? Which one is it? I mean, because I'm noticing that they're saying that he says things like this regularly. They notice that he overthinks things and he expresses himself, but then that begins the article by saying that he is someone who is not good at expressing himself and he doesn't want to talk to people about how he feels. I'm hearing two different things in this, and that is the second reason why I wanted to talk about that interview with Tracy Lords and Once Upon a Time in the Valley. I mean, yes, I did want to promote their show, but I also wanted to mention that because think about her comments that she made in that interview when she said she was acting in a certain way and she's wearing a miniskirt and wearing high heels and trying to wear provocative clothing and act in a provocative way because the underlying psychological structure was she wanted somebody to notice that something was wrong, but no one did. No one noticed. Or even if they did, they didn't interact with her in that way that would have been helpful. So that is a commonality that I saw with the disappearance of Lee Cutler. it seems like he was trying to get people to notice certain things about not interacting well with people, or not not bonding well with others, not being able to communicate well, and he's talking about this very clearly. And I'm just some guy who's reading this stuff on the internet, reading articles. Maybe I'm too influenced by that show Once Upon a Time in the Valley, or maybe I'm too influenced by my own personal experiences. But this might be something where he is telling people how he feels, he is showing people what's wrong, and everyone's like, oh, he's just overthinking things. And it got to a certain point where he couldn't deal with that anymore. Now, I completely agree that Lee would have been experiencing some very intense mental illness issues if he's contemplating suicide, if he's been hospitalized. It seems like a little bit more than contemplation, almost to the level of making very intense threats. But it's just something that I wanted to point out. So I would like to thank everyone for listening to this first half of the episode. Please stay tuned. After a quick message, we will continue the discussion. So, be right back.
You are listening to Blackbox Online Radio.
This show is brought to you by TeeSpring. Feel free to check out the merchandise. Almost all sizes and colors are listed.
Blackbox Online Radio.
And remember YouTube Premium. You can download the show, take it on the go, anywhere and anyhow.
Please like and subscribe. Grazie mille.
Okay, hello everybody, and we are back. First, I would like to give a shout out to Gray Hughes. If you haven't heard his channel yet on YouTube, Gray Hughes Investigates, I recommend that one as well. He does some very good extended live streams, and when I did the episode, The Murder of Kelly Cook, which is available here on this channel, I was frequently referencing Gray Hughes' episode on Kelly Cook, and he had a particular way of going about it where he would read numerous news articles, even though he had repeated the information more than once. And I found that it was very effective for me as a listener, because even though you're hearing a fact maybe 4 times or 5 times, sometimes you need that much to actually remember everything and to absorb it and to take everything in. So I think I'm going to do that a little bit more frequently on this channel, and perhaps you heard some in part 1 when I was saying something more than once, but I would like to go to another article about the disappearance of Lee Cutler, and this is from a blog called Footprints at the River's Edge, another news source for me, but this says it's been raising awareness for missing young adults since 2002, and their post here says, Lee Cutler was last seen on October 20th, 2007. On the night of October 19th, Lee Cutler, age 18, from Buffalo Grove, Illinois, gathered with family and friends at a favorite hibachi steakhouse to celebrate a birthday party. Afterwards, his mom headed home while he played an impromptu game of hacky sack with friends. He later met his mother and asked if he could stay over at a friend's house. The night went well, although Lee was reportedly quiet. The next morning, October 20th, at around 9:50 a.m., Lee drove another friend home and was supposed to be heading to his new job at a Rock America store at a mall in Vernon Hills, Illinois. He never arrived. This moves to the next section, clues in Lee Cutler's disappearance. On October 21st, 2007, Lee Cutler's gray 2007 Toyota Corolla was found parked near a rest stop in Baraboo, Wisconsin, 177 miles from his home in Buffalo Grove. The wayside rest is reportedly located near a cornfield off of Highway 33 in Fairfield Township and a bridge crossing the river. The area between Baraboo, Wisconsin and Portage, Wisconsin, the area was between Baraboo, Wisconsin and Portage, Wisconsin. The car was locked. After watching the car all evening in case Lee returned, the officers began investigating the vehicle and the surrounding area. I mean, I think that's just done in all fairness, to be honest. What if somebody had just gone for an extended hike, or some type of overnight camping really off the grid, wanted to really be out under the stars. I mean, that makes perfect sense to me that they would go about the investigation in that way. Inside the car, the police found a printed receipt indicating that Lee had visited Kettle Moraine State Forest at 1:41 p.m. on October 20th. The forest has a southern unit near Whitewater, Wisconsin, which is on the route between Cutler's home and Baraboo, as well as a northern unit near Cedarburg, Wisconsin, where Cutler has an ex-girlfriend. Cutler enjoyed hiking and had previously traveled to the area with friends. Also in the car were Cutler's clothing, backpack, blankets, and a copy of Into the Wild, a true story of a young man leaving his life and living in the Alaskan wilderness. I have to repeat that point, though. If anyone is using that as a blueprint or a model, the guy dies at the end of it, so, hate to give you some spoilers, but that would be a very, very impractical model to use. It's like the whole book is about, hey, if you run off into the wilderness, it will kill you. And then there was a note that was addressed to his mother. My head is too big for my body. Finally, I'll get to sleep. I'm sorry, Mom, for being a coward. I love you. Mom, please be happy. The next morning, police found many of Lee's possessions in the nearby woods, including his yarmulke, love letters from his most recent girlfriend, who was named Autumn, and his pants. Keys found in a pants pocket fit the ignition to Lee Cutler's car. A few days later, on October 26, divers in Sauk County found Lee's wallet partially submerged in the Baraboo River. The wallet contained Lee's identification and a small amount of cash. The wallet was found about 300 yards downstream from where his car was discovered. At the same time, an empty bottle of Tylenol PM, and another source, though they said it was Advil PM, that's why I've just been referring to it as this over-the-counter PM medication, was found near Lee's car. He had been using the medication to help fall asleep. Barry Frezan, the teen's stepfather, said he had been going through a difficult time. This article says his name is Barry, though we did read from that other one that his name was Larry, with an L. The friend Cutler had driven home. Police had said that Cutler had recently broken up with his girlfriend. He had been quiet about the sleepover, and the next morning during the car ride, Lee Cutler's case had been featured on Investigation Discovery's Disappeared, which features high-profile missing persons cases. According to the show, while many signs point to suicide, investigators are baffled why Cutler has not been found. Okay, and one more time, big thank you to Footprints at the River's Edge. If anybody would like to read their full extended article, as well as with all of the comments that have been placed in here, Footprints at the River's Edge. This is the name of a blog that is powered with Blogspot, like Google's blogging platform. There's also a video out there from the YouTuber Kate Philpott, another channel that I had heard for the first time. She has a video on Lee Cutler called Abandoned, His Car in the Middle of Nowhere, Lee Cutler Missing. And I want to go through some of her comments because it connects very closely to that article. The first is, well, it looks like a suicide, right? That's the conclusion of that post we were just reading. While it does look like a suicide, Kate Philpott brought up an excellent point. In the case of a suicide, someone cannot kill themselves and then move their own body to a new location. Well, where did he end up? If this was indeed a suicide, I mean, how would he have been able to move his body anywhere else? And she brought up that there is a third possible theory. I mean, the ones that we've talked about so far is that did he run away with somebody to start a new life somewhere, or just running off into the wilderness? Like, some people use the term walk away. Did he just walk away from his own life? Did he run away from his old life? And then the second one is that he committed suicide, perhaps by being intoxicated, downing the sleeping pills and entering into the river, the water source nearby, or something like that? Or did he experience an accidental death? And that is one that we haven't mentioned yet. And the reason that the accidental death theory comes into play is Kate Philpott's thumbnail even says, missing, but his campsite was found. Now, if there's a campsite that has been found, does that suggest that this could have been something rather harmless or innocuous? and that maybe somebody like a hunter or some transient or someone who was a little bit deranged or maybe even an intoxicated individual stumbled upon him, ended his life, and they hid the body somewhere. I'm sure anything's possible, right? But where's the physical evidence to support that, of course? I think that people are heavily looking at the possibility of this being a suicide, but I mean, I'm really uncertain on this one. I think the evidence could fit so neatly into all of these different areas. But one thing that I can share about is this message that I was just reading off, where it says that note that he had written out to his mother talking about his head is too big for his body. Firstly, I wrote that exact thing in my Boy Scout book. Like, I was in the Boy Scouts all the way up to Eagle, and I had this Scout handbook. And on the first page of it, one day I just made a little doodle of like a stick figure, and I wrote a stick figure with a very big head, mind you, and I wrote my head is too big for my body. And I'll say something about how there's an actual connection between that experience and this one in a second, but the exact line is, "My head is too big for my body. Finally, I'll get to sleep. I'm sorry, Mom, for being a coward. I love you, Mom. Please be happy." In Danielle Hallen's video, she stated that his ex-girlfriend, Lee Cutler's ex-girlfriend, said that he would often share something in a way in which only he could understand. He would often write in a way in which only he could understand. Now, this is the stuff over the last 12 months that we've really explored on the channel. And there are numerous reasons why people would write in a confusing way. How weird does that sound to you right now? Someone is going to share something, but the person who is receiving the message cannot understand it? Now, why would somebody do that? The first reason is the dopamine surge that comes from unconventional behavior. It feels good to be weird. It actually releases a pleasant sensation, and Rollo Tomasi would get on my case for that and say that dopamine is not about the good feelings. Those are from endorphins. Dopamine is the precursor to that. Dopamine is more about excitement, and then it's actually the endorphins in the brain that are giving those pleasant feelings. But you get the idea. There's this feeling that comes from unconventional behavior. The second reason is insecurity and privacy. If you're sharing a message in a way that someone else can't understand, you get that type of emotional outlet. You're satisfying the feeling that you have, but the other person, the receiver of the message, cannot truly challenge you, because you can always fall back on the excuse of, oh, well, they don't truly understand it. I know I presented it in a way in which they could not understand, but yeah, they can't properly criticize something, or they can't properly obtain information from it because, well, they don't understand it. It's always this type of security mechanism that is used. And the third one, and I do think that this one is very important, is that in some ways it's about power. People would want to, once again, share the emotions, they want to feel good, but also just knowing, even if it's for a short time before somebody committed suicide, knowing that after they're gone, I will have the knowledge and they will not. They will want to figure out my message, but they will not. I mean, we explore this all the time on those Zodiac Killer episodes. If you haven't followed along with Zodiac Mondays, you're welcome to. But that stuff is very clearly in the Zodiac letters and ciphers. And here on the disappearance of Lee Cutler, there could be an element of that. Somebody who is trying to just keep the knowledge in a secret, private place. And I wouldn't go as far as to say that it's power tripping. I think it's something quite different. I think it's more about the value of privacy, as well as satisfying the emotional outlet, but not truly wanting to be criticized. But all of that ties into the power play. So there could be something there. And another thing that I heard in the video that was on Kate Philpott's channel is because Lee Cutler was very devout and he honored his Jewish faith, he actually disappeared on a Jewish holiday. And some people think that it may have been an attempt to stage it as some type of religious ceremony, or I mean, it really isn't a ceremony if it's just one person, or maybe I'm using the term incorrectly, but something to do with trying to maybe mimic the concept of resurrection in some way. I really can't say too much about that, but that maybe somewhere, for some reason, he left intentionally because of a type of, he wanted to create a certain type of spiritual ritual. I think we should just leave it at that, and this could have been a ritualistic disappearance, whether that was a suicide, an accidental death, or some type of other tragic event happened to him, such as a murder. I mean, I think that that's just something that I won't be able to answer now. This is an unsolved case. It really is quite perplexing. When someone is disoriented around a water source, the risk of dying is so much higher. We have gone through this countless times on the channel, whether it's the death of Elisa Lam. It's a leading theory, actually, in the disappearance of Brandon Lawson, perhaps in the disappearance of Maura Murray. I also have an episode on the Kura Vedvik assault case about a football player that was assaulted in Baltimore, Maryland, very close to a body of water, and he lived, but he was just very lucky. It happens all the time in the true crime world. And this is one of the reasons why we have the smiley face killers theory, because so many people whom are intoxicated are around bodies of water. And the problem is, though, there's so many smiley face killer victims, or people that have been attributed to that theory, that some people may be genuine victims of homicides in that theory. It's the same with the Manchester Canals pusher, which I have an episode about as well. If you'd like to hear about the Manchester Canals pusher, is there a serial killer or these accidental deaths, about why people are being pushed into the Manchester Canals, that's on this channel. And you can always like and subscribe to follow along with any of the true crime episodes, whether it's on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or bonus episodes on the weekends. But about Lee Cutler's disappearance, his personal items are found in the river. His ID is found. The sleeping pills are missing. And we don't necessarily know when he emptied the container or how he emptied the container. But does that also raise the question of hypothermia? Because with hypothermia, people will often remove their clothes when they are freezing to death. I mean, like, it creates an agitation on the skin. I've never experienced it firsthand. But I mentioned the death of Elisa Lam. They think one of the reasons why her clothes were removed when she was in the water tank on top of the Cecil Hotel is hypothermia. She begins to feel like she's freezing, so she removes her clothing. The case of Joshua Maddox is rather similar. Anybody who is trapped in a place where they feel like they are freezing, they will remove their clothes. Did he get stuck in the river for a time being, or did he get stuck in any place temporarily, able to remove his clothes, then he got out, maybe in a disoriented state, and then met some other type of foul play? That could be something there. So, I think that this is just a very confusing mystery, and we will not get complete answers to it. But I really am quite curious about whether or not someone else was involved. And I don't mean to be just making up things and adding in assumptions. When I say I'm curious about whether or not someone else was involved, maybe someone who was present with him when he went to a Walmart. Was there someone else present with him when he went to the other state forest? Was there someone else present with him when he was nearby the campsite? I think that that is just a big question, and that would really answer it. Otherwise, what's the alternative? Well, the alternative would be that he removed all of his clothes, and that he entered the woods, and that he wanted to commit suicide in a place where he would not be found. So we're talking about going really far out, and maybe even finding a place in which he felt he would not be explored or would not be checked thoroughly. People also tend to have some fascination to do that. That's what people would do if they would not want to be found. Alright, well, I think that's where I'm going to have to leave it at for now, but thank you to everyone who has listened to this episode here. And if you have anything to say about the disappearance of Lee Cutler, please put your comments in the section below. I would love to read them. You can also write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio@AOL.com, or you can send it into the DMs on Instagram, BlackBoxNed88 on Instagram. My Facebook is also in the description box. There's a Facebook page for the show, Black Box Online Radio, and you can always visit the Teespring page. Thank you to everyone who has purchased t-shirts. You guys are awesome. But that will be all for me now. See you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.